The following story is by Reddit user ibSunPraisin. Growing up, I lived pretty much in the middle of nowhere, deep in the heart of the Angelina National Forest. My house is so entrenched in trees that on Google Maps you can't even see my house through the trees. My closest neighbor lived easily a mile and a half away, and I lived so far out that the only internet place in town couldn't run a cable out that far. I lived in a small trailer on a 5-acre plot with most of the property covered woodland with only a small portion actually cleared out to make my front backyard. One day during the summer after my sophomore year in high school, a few weeks after my brother moved off to go to college, my parents told me that they had scheduled a vacation to go to Tampa to celebrate their 20th anniversary, and that they would be gone for the week, leaving Sunday and returning Saturday. The morning before they left, my mom approached me while microwaving a burrito and said, "Don't worry, sweetie, it's just a week." She smiled and tousled my hair and continued, "You get to be the man of the house. Just make sure we come back to it in one piece. There's plenty of food in the fridge, so it's not like we're leaving you out here to die." I pulled away and fixed my hair. "It sure feels like it. You won't even let me invite anyone over, will you?" "Of course not," she snapped. "You know how I feel about this place," she glared. My mother hated the house that we lived in with a passion and was completely embarrassed of it. My brother and I had frequently put holes in the walls fighting, and my dad had to try his best to patch up the holes. Because of this and other reasons, my mom never let anyone come over to visit, even family. As the days get dragged on, my life consisted of feeding the pets, 2 rabbits in their cages, and our 3 dogs and 1 cat, getting the mail and becoming fully absorbed in playing Oblivion, Hitman, and Devil May Cry 3. After completely fucking up my sleep schedule, I found that a few days passed and it was around 9 p.m. on Wednesday. In the middle of Sheogorath ranting about cheese, I heard a loud knock on the door which nearly made me jump out of my skin. I paused the game and went to the door, baseball bat in hand. Peering out of the diamond-shaped window on the cheaply made door, I saw a police officer that I knew who went to my church. "Sorry for startling you," he said with half a smile. "You didn't startle me," I said flatly, trying to regain my composure. With a more serious tone, he looked at me and said, "Look, I don't mean to scare you, but there's been sightings of a man wandering through people's yard in the area, and on the roads. It might be nothing, but I recommend you lock your doors and don't answer the door unless you know the person." "Thanks for the warning. I'll make sure everything is locked up tight," I said, feeling more uneasy than I had felt in a long time. After he drove off, a wave of fear fell over me. I absolutely hated the thought of someone being out there. Ever since watching the Halloween movies, the thought of someone watching you without you knowing creeped the fuck out of me. I went through the house and made sure the doors were locked, and the windows didn't have an AC unit in them, and they were locked. I stopped in my parents' bedroom and pulled my dad's 357 out of his bedside table and took it into my room. I continued the game, trying to get my mind off of what had just happened, and ended up playing until around 3 a.m. before passing out. The next day I woke up around 1 p.m. Groggy, I slid out of bed and went outside to feed the pets. While my dogs eagerly devoured the food I placed for them, and my cat sat on the front porch purring, eating his food, I went inside and grabbed the rabbit food. Walking around the house, I noticed something weird. One of the rabbits wasn't in his cage. "What the fuck?" I said under my breath as I approached the cage. The cage stood on long wood beams, putting the cage about chest height for me. The cage was closed and locked, but the rabbit was nowhere in sight. The other rabbit, Floppy, on the other side of the cage, was curled into a corner and shaking. "Where the fuck was the other one?" I said aloud to myself. I left rabbit food and went inside and called my dad. "Hey Dad, how are you?" "Great, it's beautiful here and the weather is amazing. I don't mean to bother you guys, but one of the rabbits is missing and the cage is closed," I said, conveniently leaving out the visit from the night before. "Maybe he jumped out because you didn't fully close the cage and swing it shut," he offered. "I think I would have remembered that," I shot back. "Well, go look for him. I hope none of the dogs got a hold of him," he sighed. "I'll look into it when I get back, okay?" "Alright," I replied. "Enjoy your trip. I'll take care of this." After the click, I hung up the phone and went to my room to retrieve the pistol laying on my bed. As I was leaving the room, I could see a faint outline of a figure in the woodline about 30 feet from the house. A chill ran up my spine. I grabbed the pistol tight and ran out the front door over to the woodline. By the time I had gotten there, the figure, whatever it was, had vanished. "I don't know who you are, but you are trespassing. Do not let me catch you around here again," I shouted. I raised the pistol above my head and fired around into the air. Ears ringing, I knew that even if it was my eyes playing tricks on me, that if someone had been there, that they now knew that this was not the house to mess with. The rest of the day was uneventful, mostly filled with me playing games and watching a few DVDs. Around 5 a.m. on Friday morning, I heard a loud thunk followed by loud barking from my dogs. I rolled out of bed, grabbed the pistol that had become my safety blanket, and went outside. The front yard looked normal. so I decided to check the backyard. As I turned the corner, my heart skipped a beat. What the actual fuck? Outside my house, about 15 feet away, was an old work shed and a concrete well that stood about 5 feet above the ground, with a huge 120-pound concrete lid over it. But it wasn't. The large round lid laid about 4 feet away from the well. My body froze. Nothing beside a large person could ever get that lid to move, let alone take it off and move it that far. I looked up and saw a figure about 20 feet away that clearly looked like a man. Even in the early morning hours, I was positive at what I saw. I leveled the pistol at the figure, pulled the hammer back. "Get the fuck out of here," I choked out as loud as I could. I moved the barrel slightly to the left of the figure and fired a round, letting whoever it was know that I was not fucking around. The figure let out a low hissing noise and slowly turned and disappeared back in the woods. Keeping the pistol trained on the last position of the figure, I slowly backed up until I was at the edge of the house, and as soon as I was there, I turned and sprinted to the front door. Swinging it open, I ran over to the counter and grabbed the phone. 911, I dialed frantically. 911, what's your emergency? A woman calmly stated. I think someone is outside my house. Some stuff I have outside has been moved, and I think I saw him in the woods outside my house, I said, voice shaking, trying to regain my composure. Okay, sir, please remain calm. What is your name and address? As I told her the information, she told me that they were sending a squad car out to investigate, and to remain on the line with her until they arrived. As I waited with her, she was continually giving me encouragements and telling me to remain calm, and that they were almost there. Nervously, I kept glancing at the windows for any sight of the figure. As I saw a squad car pull up, I informed her that they had arrived. Okay, remember, everything will be alright. We're here for you, she said earnestly. Thank you for all your help, I replied as I hung up the phone and headed for the door. As I opened the door, the police reached for their pistols, pointed at me, and yelled, Sir, please lay down your firearm. What? I replied quietly. Looking down, I noticed that I was still carrying the pistol. It had become second nature at that point. Sorry, I said sheepishly as I put my free hand up and slowly lowered the gun to the floor. I could see a wave of relief wash over them as they lowered their arms. Let's go to where you saw the figure last, he said as he approached me with his partner closely behind him. I led them around the house and pointed at the lid and explained to them that it was on the well the last time I had seen it before the morning events had occurred. As he approached the well, he saw the shack's door cracked open, and he motioned to it and asked, Do you mind if we look inside? Sure, I replied. As he walked inside, he jumped back and drew his pistol out of the holster. He flicked the light on, and instantly my blood ran cold. In the middle of the floor, my rabbit's head lay in a puddle of blood, with the rest of it scattered on the floor. Streaks of blood were all over the walls and ceiling of the small shack. What in God's name happened here? He shouted at me. I don't know. He went missing a few days ago. I thought he might have escaped his cage and ran off into the woods, I defended. He grabbed his partner's shoulders and led him outside of earshot and started whispering to him. After a few minutes, they walked back over to me, and as he straightened his shirt, he looked at me and said, Look, we agree that something odd is going on around here, and we're going to call in another car, and we're going to take turns watching your house to make sure nothing else happens. So are you just going to sit in the driveway? I asked. Only for a bit. We will drive up and down the street to see if there's any signs of anyone else in the area, but don't worry, we won't be far from you. Later that night, around 11, I left my room for the first time to look outside. I saw the squad car idling in my driveway, with the two officers conversing inside. Feeling more at ease, I went into my room and took a nap, hoping that this would just blow over in the morning. Around 3 a.m., I awoke and went to the restroom. As I looked outside the front door, I noticed that the car was gone. Probably on one of their sweeps, I told myself. I looked across the living room at the window and I tried to scream, but nothing would come out. My heart felt like it had stopped. Looking back at me was a tall, lanky figure that looked like an even more demented version of Mr. Sardonicus and Nosferatu. A wide, wicked smile that looked like the edges of his mouth were touching his ears. He had a long, pointed nose and beady black eyes and thin, slicked back hair. I started to raise my arm and to point the pistol at him, but as a larger wave of fear washed over me, I noticed that I had left it in the bedroom. He smiled even wider as he lowered his gaze and started pushing at the window AC unit. I broke off in a sprint and slammed the door behind me, quickly grabbing the arm of the couch and dragging it up to the door. There was a loud noise as I heard the window unit hit the floor. Straining, I heard light footsteps approaching the door, followed by a light chuckle. Heart in my throat, I heard him lightly tapping his fingers on the door. I grabbed the mattress off of my bed and threw it on top of the door to add extra weight. After grabbing the pistol, I looked around the room for the phone so I could call for help. "I'm so fucking stupid," I shouted in my head as I realized I put the landline on the charger earlier that day. After 10 straight minutes of tapping on the door, the sound abruptly stopped, and I heard the footsteps fade away. I took the chance to grab my dresser and slide it in front of my window. I was disappointed. The dresser wasn't big enough to cover the entire window, leaving only a 3-inch sliver uncovered. As I took a deep breath trying to calm myself, I heard a loud knock at the window. I looked up and almost cried. 3 feet away from me, I saw him. His forehead was pressed against the window, his eyes wide. He licked his pale lips and raised his hand and used his hand to motion for me to come here. I raised the gun and fired 2 rounds into where his chest was, and he didn't even blink. Ears ringing, I felt hot tears fall down my face. Shocked and feeling my sanity slip away from me, I looked as he wagged his finger at me and slowly reached his fingers into the holes caused by the shots and started pulling away at the glass. I prayed to every god that would listen to save me as I fired the rest of the shots at the man. Nothing fazed him. Just as he got his entire arm through, his face lit up, flashing red and blue light. Apparently the cops had heard the gunshots and rushed back to the house. He looked at the source of the light and frowned. He looked back at me. I could now see his ugly features in a light that I wish I hadn't. His eyes were bloodshot, and his teeth had disgusting shades of red and yellow. He lowered his head and parted his lips. "Next time," he hissed as he backed away and fading into the night. The cops kicked in the front door and shouted my name. "I'm in here," I said, voice quivering. I pulled the couch back and let them in. I explained what I saw and what happened, leaving out the details of the man's face. They understandably looked slightly skeptical. No man, let alone many creatures that walk this earth, can survive 6 shots in the chest from a pistol of that caliber. I stood by my story and they said it was best if I spent the rest of the night at the station. We pulled out the other window units and closed the windows, locked the door, and left. Around 4:30, I was sitting at the station with one of the clerks. They had informed my parents of what happened and they were headed back to come and get me. After that, they decided it was finally time to move into a real house. We sold the land and houses and moved into a nice house across town. Nothing out of the ordinary happened for years to come. I went on to graduate and then I joined the military and went overseas for a few years. The reason I decided to tell this story now is because I'm on vacation and I'm staying at my parents' house. And I keep hearing tapping on the back door. And that's the end of this video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see videos just like this one.